Hi everybody, very welcome to our Sunday night live stream that's starting to be a relatively fixed feature here on the Mentor Pilot channel. I hope you're all doing absolutely fantastic. I hope you have had a great weekend and I hope you have your questions ready for tonight. I have yours for at least, well, approximately 1 hour from now on. And as always, guys, I am going to prioritize questions that are asked by the super chat. So that little dollar symbol that you have below your normal chat, that will send a super chat, and since that actually costs a little bit of money, I will always answer the questions that are being posted through the super chat. Otherwise, I will be using the Mentour Aviation app, and I do have a little bit of news that will come with the Mentour Aviation app coming up, so I want to talk a little bit about that. So and then, of course, I will be answering all of, well, not all of them, but the questions that are coming up here in the normal chat as well, as, you know, when I have time. But if there's continuously super chat questions coming up, then those are the ones that will have priority. Right, great to see you all here. O'Neill, Anton, Marek. I mean, I'm always amazed about the amount of people that is willing to sit up on a Sunday night just watching me and hearing me talk. It's great to have you all here. You're really appreciated. You are the backbone of the channel. I know that. You are the guys who are building the community, who are telling people about the channel, and it's really appreciated. Right, so the first thing that I wanted to say is that I know that I've been a little bit away from the app for a while, okay? I have been working very hard in the simulator and I have been flying quite a bit since New Year's, and I haven't been able to give you guys in the Mentour Aviation app the kind of attention that you require, which is why I am now taking some help to upgrade the content, to make sure that every time that, well, maybe not every time, but most of the time that you go into the app, there will be new content there. There will be new documentaries, new cool stuff about aviation. Anytime that something happens out in the aviation world, I will, you know, update something. There will be new videos available so that you guys feel that you get the worth out of the absolutely free app, okay? So there's going to be more things happening, and I have more plans for what's going to happen with the app. Now, me and my wife, who actually owns the company that owns the app, we have to convince a couple of bankers to give us a loan in order to upgrade some of the features in the app. It might take a little while, but my idea, my hope and my dream is that the Mentour Aviation app is going to be a hub for all of you guys out there who are interested in aviation. I want it to be a global thing where people can go to get tips about flight schools, to ask about, you know, whatever questions there might be, and get positive and constructive answers back. So that is what I am aiming for. If you haven't already downloaded the app, I want you to do 3 things. Now listen to me, 3 things. I want you to A, download the app, absolutely free, will not cost you anything. 2, register yourself in the app, and the only way to that's the only way to kind of participate in the chat. You need to be a registered user. So register, and when you do that, write down your email and your nickname before you press register. All right, because if you just press register, it will just tell you that you're using you know, a not good email address. So do that. And number 3, if you have time and you feel like you want to, I really appreciate if you go out to the different app stores, either Play Store or iOS App Store, and give the app a review and a grading. It's really important, because the more people that does that, the more room it will get inside of the App Store. The more people will get it, the more people will get in, the cooler the content will become, the more I can attract flight schools to kind of sponsor the thing, and the better I can make it for you guys. So I need your help to make this happen, okay? There's almost 6,000 or 7,000 people in there now, but we need to make it even bigger. So that's what I wanted to say. Right, we're starting to get some super chats here. Young Aviators is first, and I will come to it in a second. But I promised my users of the app, which I sent a push out to yesterday, to explain a little bit of, well, actually to answer some questions that they had. I had one question coming up that was, can you switch a type rating in the middle of a type rating? All right, and the answer to that is not if you want to actually have the type rating you have started, okay? If you start a type rating, you have to finish it. You have to do a skill test, and only after the skill test, and really after you've done your base training, will you be able to put that into your license, okay? So if you're in doing a type rating for a 737, and then you switch over to an Airbus type rating, It's like starting all over again, but you've lost the money that you've invested in the beginning of the 737 type rating. So the answer to that is no, not if you want to keep the type rating, right? The second question that I got yesterday from quite a lot of them was, can you tell us something about when something strange happened to you or something cool happened to you in your career? And of course I can. That's what I'm here for. So there are things happening all the time, and strange things that has to do with passengers or company. I don't really want to talk about because it can infringe on, you know, privacy issues for those passengers. But a couple of cool things. So you know, people have asked, for example, if I've ever seen anything that would, you know, would account towards UFOs. If I've seen something that's that kind of strange, and I have actually. Quite early in my career, I was flying over the Alps during nighttime. It's probably around 10 o'clock at night, when suddenly two lights appeared below the aircraft. Okay, we were just a couple of thousand feet above the minimum safe altitude over the Alps. We were descending in towards Bergamo, if I'm not mistaken. So the fact that they were below us would indicate that, you know, there wouldn't be any aircraft because they would be below minimum safe altitude. But they were following the same speed as us. So they couldn't have been lights on the ground because they wouldn't have been moving. You could clearly see when stuff is on the ground because obviously it's coming and we're passing it. But these were keeping the same distance, and there were two of them, yellow to kind of glowing, kind of like fire in color, and they kept up with us for maybe 3-4 minutes. I had time to take some photographs actually that I probably have stored somewhere before they just suddenly click click disappeared. So we were figuring maybe they were afterburners of some fighter jets or something, but then again they were very low, and the afterburners has to have a more bluish color. So these are the kind of things that pilots generally account for as being strange. And we call it UFOs because it is unidentified flying objects. Doesn't mean that it has to be extraterrestrials, but yeah, we do see those kind of things from time to time that tends to be very hard to explain. Okay. Right, I'm gonna save I will talk a little bit more about some nice stuff that has happened during the career later on if you stay tuned and if you remind me. Right now I'm gonna go and start answering the super chat questions that I see is piling up below. Cool. So young aviators, please may you explain what INC is? Thanks, Peter. INC. In what context is that? IMC. I see. IMC. All right. Instrument meteorological conditions. Okay, it basically means that we are flying in cloud, right? VMC is visual meteorological conditions, and IMC is instrument meteorological conditions. So when we're flying IMC, it means that we're flying inside of clouds and we're flying towards with the use of our instruments only. So IMC, you're only allowed to fly if you have an IFR certificate. But you can fly on top on VMC on a PPL VMC license only, but IMC, as in actually inside of cloud, you need an IFR rating for, and VMC is what you fly on when you're flying only on meteorological, like visual meteorological conditions, if that makes any sense. I hope that answers your question. It's as easy as that, basically. So J Turner 42, can you use reverse thrust in flight? Also, what is N2 and N1? No, you can't use reverse thrust in flight because you would crash. You would stall the wings and the aircraft would crash. That it has happened. It was a Nikki flight back in, now I can't remember exactly what year it was, that had a thrust reverser deployment in flight, and they did crash the aircraft. Okay, we do have a checklist for thrust reverser deployment in flight, but it's based on us being on fairly low altitude, where we can actually counteract the effects of a reverser deployment in flight. But if it happens at high altitude, it is unlikely that we'll be able to recover the flight. So no. You can deploy the thrust reversers below, I think it is 10 feet, if I'm not mistaken, on the 737. Under certain conditions, you can actually start deploying them. We do not do that. I have seen videos on the internet where people have done that. You can be absolutely sure that that happened by mistake. That the pilots came in and they were really, really focused because it was really turbulent or really windy, and by mistake they actually opened the thrust reverser before main gear touchdown. So that can happen. But what happens then, if you're unlucky, is that the aircraft will just fall from whatever altitude it is, and you will have a very hard landing indeed. All right, so we do not voluntarily deploy the thrust reverser in flights. So N2 and N1 are, let's see how to explain that in an easy way. The N1 is the rotation speed of the big fan in front of the engine. Okay, N2 is the compressor part. It's a second stage behind. That is that. So that the reason that you have those two both are the N2 is the actual core part of the engine, which is actually driving the N1. Okay, so those two are not connected mechanically to each other. The fan is actually not connected to the core of the engine. The way that the jet engine works, or the way that the big modern jet engine works, is that the core of the engine is what you start up. Okay, so you start that up first. That's the thing that starts spinning. That's what the starter motor is connected to. And then when that is, when the N2 has reached a certain percentage, it is sucking air through the engine, and that air is actually turning the fan in the front, the N1. Okay, N1 is what's producing the thrust. So it's N1 we're looking at when we're measuring how much thrust we want to get out of the engine, and that is measured in a percentage, going from 0 up to 100%, and you can actually go a little bit over 100%, which is a bit weird, but more about that later on. So the core of the engine is then sucking the air through, and that is accelerating the fan. And when it's accelerating enough, the fan is the thing that is producing the thrust because of the high bypass ratio. It's a lot of air being pushed by that enormous fan. This is also why you can see that the fan is moving sometimes. Even when the engine is not running, the fan is still moving, and that's also why we pilots can go up and move the fan, because it's not physically, mechanically connected to the core of the jet engine. It just goes out and then it drives part of the compressor in the back. But this is part, when you're doing your ATPL training or your CPL training, you will be reading all about how the mechanics of a jet engine actually work. So I'm trying to explain it in layman's terms now, but that's the simple way of explaining it. So I hope that makes sense. Right, more stuff. So Nick Eberts, will high-speed trains ever become a more popular option than domestic flights? Possibly. They certainly are. Already now on some distances, like we're talking inter-domestic short distances, like for example Barcelona to Madrid in Spain. I would personally rather take the train and take a flight between those two, because even though the flight is still quicker, you still have to get out to the airport, get through security, board the flight, fly over, get off, take your bags, then get yourself from the airport in Madrid and into Madrid. While if I'm getting myself on a high-speed train, I can put my computer down on a table in the town center, and then I'll get myself to Madrid town center, and that's it. So on those kind of distances, it's very hard to beat the train, both in efficiency and time, actually, if you count the whole time. Now, that is kind of the max as well. If you want to start going, flights that are around 2 hours or so on, I think that those ones will be about 4 hours or something, or a little bit more with the high-speed train. And then we're starting to talk a little bit too much difference in time. So from that and upwards, I think that the flights will still be able to compete. But sure, it's very hard to compete with high-speed trains on short to medium distances. Now, I'm getting always questions about the Hyperloop. Now, Hyperloop, we haven't even seen yet, okay? There's still no functioning city-to-city Hyperloop connection that people can actually use. There are test drives of it. Hyperloop is going to go even quicker, much quicker. So then that might extend the range of what we now look at as high-speed trains efficiency. Okay, so we'll see what happens in the future. It is possible, and to a certain extent, I hope that those kind of more environmentally friendly condition solutions will be more popular as for mass transit. But there will always be, unless there's something new, some new technology that I haven't even heard of yet, that's going to come, we will always see flights on longer distances, certainly distances that covers a lot of water and things like that. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. Jordan Coles, I was once on a flight where a passenger was under police escort. He was handcuffed. Are pilots made aware if a passenger is under police escort? Yeah, we are. Those tends to be deportees. Okay, and deportees I have to be aware of. I have to actually sanction it. I have to agree to it, which is something that I always do if all the precautions are being met. They cannot sit on certain seats. They cannot be what we call ABPs, able-bodied persons, like the people who are supposed to help in case of an evacuation. So there's special seats, and also in most conditions we get to take care of their traveling documents. So the flight crew actually takes their travel documents, including their passport, and hands that over to police. That's if there's no direct police escort. I think if there is an actual police escort, the police will probably retain the travel documents. But if there's not, so if there's a police that escorts the traveler onto the plane, then leaves them there, and then there's police taking over at the other side, then their travel documents are kept inside of the locked cockpit door to make sure that they don't try to get away. Okay, but yeah, the short answer to your question is yes, we are always aware. I have to be aware because I am responsible for the safety on board of all my passengers, and I have to know if there's something that could jeopardize the safety of it. Now, having said that, there's very rarely any problem with these kind of passengers. Cool, Wilhelm Nordström, hey from Västerås. Hey. Vilken del av ATPL var kämpigast? What part of the ATPL theory, I'm guessing that you're wondering, was the hardest? So this is different for different people, all right? Me personally, air law I thought was quite tricky, just because all of the other subjects kind of made sense. You could kind of figure out what it is, but air law is one of those things that you just have to read and remember, just like any kind of law, really. So air law, I remember that navigation was tricky as well. That was interesting, but to a certain extent we were already then dealing with stuff that we don't really use today, like Laurent C and grid navigation, things like that. It is still used to a certain extent, but very little. So that's what I thought. I always thought meteorology was tricky, but really, really interesting. So I had no real problems with that. But the ATPL theory is a lot of stuff that you need to put in during a short amount of time. So you do really need to have a very strict study regime, and you need to keep to it. Okay, just remember that there is a light at the other side of the tunnel. Once you're done with them, you won't have to think about them again. All right, most of the stuff, like the stuff that I use on a daily basis, I keep up to date. Some of the stuff I haven't ever come across after I finish the exams, but it is a lot of hard work, but keep in there. You know, once you're done, you're done. Good luck. CA97. Hi, Peter. Is it always the co-pilot who does the walk around? What do you have to look for when doing it? I'm really enjoying your videos. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, CA97. No, it is not always the first officer who does the walk around. In fact, we do it every other time, right? So it's 50% the captain, 50% the first officer, at least in my airline. This might be airline specific as well. But what we tend to do is that the pilot who's pilot flying, who's going to be the one who's flying the aircraft over to the next destination, stays inside, sets up for the departure, sets up the FMC, does all of the pre-flight stuff. The one who is not, the one who's going to be pilot monitoring and take care of the radio communication, he or she is the one who's going to do the walk around. And what they look for is basically everything. Okay, but in a very short overview, they you go out and you looked at all the sensors and probes are not damaged, that they are there. You looked at to make sure that you haven't got any bird strikes, so there haven't been any ground collision or anyone's been hitting you when they've taken off bags, for example, or with the stairs. You are looking, make sure that all the doors and hatches are closed properly, that the leading edges and the wings are free of ice, as well as the tail and the stabilizer, of course. Looking for dents and bumps, and if you do find any, because sometimes there are some small dents, then they have to correspond with an entry in the tech log. If it's not, then the aircraft is tech until an engineer can come and verify that there's not a dangerous amount of dent, because you can kind of approve some small dents in certain areas, and that's it. What else? We make sure that there's no cargo being left in the aft cargo compartment. If we've have that, we check inside of the wheel well bay to make sure that there's no hydraulic leaks, to make sure that the fire extinguishers are full, that the hydraulic reservoirs are full, that there's no damage to the tires. The tires are within, you know, approved usage. What else? And then basically just an overview to make sure that there's nothing that looks out of place or odd. I really want to do a video on this. All right, I really do want to do an instruction video on the walk around. The problem with that is that I do need an aircraft. So I need an aircraft standing in a hangar that I can get access to. So until I get that, it's going to be hard to do. But it's on my to-do list. And if you want to see how I'm actually doing a setup, step by step from dark and cold up until we are taxiing, inside of the Mentour Aviation app, there is a playlist for this. Now, it does cost a little bit less than a hamburger to buy, but it will finance, you know, what I'm doing with the app. So if you guys are interested in seeing that in full 360, you don't need a headset for it. You can watch it on your phone, or you can use a VR headset, but you can see the whole cockpit. It's just like sitting on the jump seat. So I do highly recommend that you guys check that out, okay, if you haven't already. Get the app in anyway. You know? Cool. So U1CD3CS. That's one hell of a nickname. My dream is to become a pilot, but I'm worried. There was an incident just after I got full age, and now I got a record, which is 10 years in the register. Is this 100% a decline for an application at an airline? If you mean a criminal record, it tends to be. Okay, and the reason for that is because you need security clearance before you can get into an airline, so that you can get access to airside and you can get into the airport. Now, as part of getting that security clearance, they will check your criminal record. So, in most cases, if you have a criminal record, it's not going to be possible. However, I don't know exactly what the rules are. So it is worth checking it out, but I am afraid that a criminal record is in most cases kind of inhibited for getting into an airline in the first place. So you might have to wait those 10 years out. But once again, this is just me and my own, based on my own experience. I might be wrong, and it might also be different in different parts of the world. So check it out, and I wish you the best of luck. So Doug, Paulie, good to see you here, Doug. I am flying for the first time in 17 years come July. I have become a wheelchair user with care needs since. It is a 40-minute flight in a 33-seat turboprop Saab from Glasgow to Islay. Very nervous. Well, Doug, you shouldn't be, right? We're very used to wheelchair passengers. You should be taken very well care of from when you get into the airport until you get to the flight, and then until you get out again from the airport. They will take good care of you. Ask if you have any kind of questions at any point. Make sure you ask the person that is with you and helping you, and ask the flight attendants and the flight crew if you have any more questions. And send me some private messages here on Facebook or through the app. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Once again, Doug, thank you for contributing, and I hope you will get a great flight. Let me know how it goes, by the way. Let me know in Facebook or something. I'm quite interested in knowing your opinion about the experience. Right, so there is no more super chats for the moment, which means that I can go to the Mentour Aviation app to see what's coming up. Mentour, if you had to work for another airline, which airline would you pick and why? That's a great question. All right. First of all, I'm just going to take some coffee because I need to. My throat is starting to dry up. Right. First of all, when you get into your career, you will have no choice when it comes to airline, right? There's nothing about choosing an airline. It's all about finding an airline who wants you for their airline. Okay. When you get a little bit more experience, then you start to be able to possibly not choose, but at least apply to different airlines, and that there might still be a problem to get into those airlines. I would tend to look at airlines that will satisfy my and my family's life quality. Okay, I would like to work for an airline that takes care of me as an employee, that make sure that I have a good roster, that it's possible to get annual leave, which is really important for pilots. Obviously, that the salary can sustain the lifestyle, and everything with the salary is not the biggest. It's not the most important thing. The most important thing tends to be stability, roster stability, and annual leave, and those kind of things. Okay, so at the moment, I'm very happy with the airline that I'm working for. I have no issues. There's a little bit of a pain, this whole thing that I'm doing during the winter, but it's working quite well at the moment. So I'm not looking. If I would want to work for a different airline, there's no airline that pops to mind right now. I mean, there are some really good airlines out there. So that I would love to work for Richard Branson. The Virgin Group would be cool to work for, just because I'm a big fan of how he deals with his employees and his businesses in general. So Virgin Atlantic, for example, would be cool. British Airways is a great company. So is Lufthansa. Scandinavian Airline System is the Swedish airline. That's the one that we all looked up to when we were doing our training. So, I mean, there's loads and loads of good airlines, and they all have their pros and cons, and there's no perfect employer. So, what I said in the beginning is true. The airline that will provide what is good for me and my family at this stage in my life would be the airline that I would apply for. Qantas is a good airline as well. There's loads of good airlines. Emirates, yeah, I have friends in Emirates as well. Freckles, 057, Mentour, what made you choose the 737? Now, this is also a very common misconception, okay? Nothing made me choose the 737. In fact, a pilot very rarely chooses which airplane he's going to fly or she's going to fly. The fact is that you get into an airline job, and that job will determine what type you fly, and you will have very little to say about it. So I'm getting loads of these questions, like, why don't you choose to fly a bigger type, or why don't you choose to switch over to the Airbus, or why don't you want to fly this? And if you ask any pilot who's been in the business for more than a few years, he or she will tell you exactly the same. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If my airline would come to me tomorrow and say, we're going to keep your terms and conditions, we're going to give you a little bit more salary, we want you to fly a Cessna 152 when the weather is good. Most pilots would actually probably do it. I know that sounds strange, but the fact is that the kind of material you're flying, the aircraft, it's just as far to the nose from a 737 cockpit to the nose as it is from an Airbus 380 to the nose. You sit in the front of it, you sit in the cockpit. So once you're, maybe not Cessna 152, but if you're sitting in an airliner, it doesn't really matter what airliner you sit in. They are all good. The 737, I love flying that because it's still a fairly hands-on aircraft, right? It has a good autopilot that you can rely on, but you can still hand fly it, and it's still connected with, it's not a fly-by-wire completely, so you can still kind of feel the rudders, and it's reliable, When stuff breaks on it, you can fix it fairly easily, and there's always redundancy in the systems. It doesn't have problems with the computers giving up that often, stuff like that. So it's kind of like the Volvo of the airline world, where Airbus would be more like an Audi, a little bit more sporty, but has a tendency maybe to have a little bit too complicated systems sometimes. While the Boeing is, a Volvo. It just runs, not too sexy. It just runs. All right. At least that's what I think myself. Hi, sir, from Xulex. I'm a marshal at Amsterdam Schiphol. Had you ever had a bad experience when you tried to dock your aircraft? Thank you, Captain, from Danny. No, I have been fortunate. Okay, we have to always have a lookout, even if we have a good marshalling or docking system. We have to be very careful because there have been instances of people hitting, for example, back steps or ground equipment when they've been taxiing into stand. Even though the marshalling system have been working, and even though a marshal have been there, that has happened. Now, it has never happened to me. So all of the people that I've come across has been very, very professional, very good at the job. I'm thinking of if I've had any incidents of it. I mean, everyone has had incidents where the docking system doesn't work, or it suddenly stops working, and you have to hold position until they get a marshaller out to help you understand. But apart from that, no, not really. I mean, a captain who's taxiing the aircraft is responsible for the aircraft until the second it's stopped and the engines are shut down, and even after that, of course. But that means that if we are ever doubtful, if we see something we don't like of any sort, we hold position and ask for assistance. That's what we are trained to do, which means that it's very rare for us to end up in situations which we can't get out of. And of course, as we are getting closer to gate, the maneuvering area is getting smaller and smaller. There's more and more stuff coming up next to the aircraft, which makes us more and more nervous. So we just go slower and slower and make sure to take care and look one time extra rather than one time too few. Good work, by the way. Great work. I haven't flown to Schiphol myself, but I would love to try it. Right, from Nick Eberts. Were you flying on 9/11, and how has it changed you as a pilot? I wasn't flying, well, maybe I was actually, but I was in training then. When 9/11 happened, I was actually at the flight school in Västerås. I was in my apartment. I had just come back, I think, from a theory lesson. And I remember watching the second aircraft hit the towers live. It was a horrible thing. Not only, I mean, no one who was there and saw it live outside of the US could believe that it was actually happening. It was just like a movie. You knew immediately that this is going to have severe repercussions, global repercussions, and it did. It was bad for the aviation industry. It was just bad, right? It has closed it up. It has made it more expensive, more uncomfortable, more closed from every single point of view. Has it changed me as a pilot? No, because I was just in the beginning of my aviation career, so I've never really seen anything else. But it has made aviation less fun. All right. I used to love when I was a kid to come up. We used to have these flimsy cockpit doors that would open during the takeoff. I remember that in the beginning of me in my aviation career, before the locked cockpit door that came as a consequence of 9/11, the doors used to swing open sometimes during the takeoff. And I remember, taking off and you hear that bang when that door opened, and you had to check back what it was. And when you look back, you'd have 189 passengers looking forward into the cockpit. I used to love that. I used to love that people could come up and say hello, even in flight and things. But 9/11 changed that. It is still affecting the airline business, and it is just bad. That's it. It's a sad thing. I don't really have much more to say about it. It's you can see the repercussions in the political landscape still. I don't think that Donald Trump would be in the White House necessarily if that hadn't happened. It's just these kind of things, they make waves for decades to come. It's one of those dividers that you wish would never happen, but unfortunately they do. So, Mindaugas Vauchinas, sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Hi, I love your videos. Have you ever had any really scary moments or emergencies while flying through your career? No, and this question keeps popping up about scary moments. I've had places where I felt uncomfortable, and that generally has to do with weather that suddenly appears. Thunderstorms, for example, are really, really hard to predict. Even though we do carry loads of extra fuel when we think they're going to happen, they can happen at very short notice, and that's happened on a few times where the thunderstorms comes and they just put themselves in the very worst possible positions over an airport, maybe even over the alternate. We need to rethink and replan. So that's happened on a couple of occasions, and in those occasions, it's just about using your colleagues, talking to your first officer, seeing what kind of options we have, and then execute that. Okay. I've had medical emergencies, but medical emergencies, the thing to think about there is just basically just to find a good airport fairly quickly, and then in a safe and controlled and SOP way, get down onto the ground as soon as you can, but while still maintaining security. So you never jeopardize or risk the safety and security of everyone on board in order to expedite the descent. You just do it as quickly as you can, and that tends not to really increase the pulse much for pilots as such. Otherwise, like I said in my previous live stream as well, I've had flap problems. The flaps, he came out, but what happened was that I was on approach into Stockholm Skavsta, where I was based before, and I could, we were at flaps flaps 1, selected flaps 5, and I could just see in the corner of my eye that the needle started splitting. And when that happens, when you have sensors feeling that the flaps are moving at different speeds, the flap slat electronic unit on the 737 just holds it. It just grabs the flaps and sticks it in place. Okay, that's to make sure that you don't get asymmetric flaps, which might give controllability issues. But the problem with that, obviously, is that you can't move the flaps after that. And I was looking at the flap needles, which were split like that, and then we had a little bit of turbulence, and the needles just clicked up together again. So what had happened was probably an indication fault, some kind of problem with the sensors that are feeling the flap movements. But once the flap slat electronic unit has grabbed it, you have to use the standby flap extension in order to get it out. So what me and the captain, I was first officer back then, what me and the captain did was we took up the checklist that was right at that moment, which was what was it? The trailing edge flap not in agreement. I think it was called that. Anyway, it wasn't the asymmetric trailing edge flap. There were two different checklists, because the thing that triggered it was an asymmetric flap, but then it was trailing edge flap not in agreement. So it's a little bit tricky which one to go for. But we would use that. We extended the flaps using that to flap 15. And we landed the aircraft with flap 15, which requires a bit longer landing distance, a little bit strange kind of attitude, but nothing really out of that, right? Nothing worse than that. So so far, those have kind of been the worst things that I've had. You never know when the real thing hits. That's why we always train to be ready for that. But like I said again, the 737 is really reliable, and we are flying very, very new aircraft, so it's very rare to have any major problems with them. Touch wood. Cool. Have you got to be very careful not to kick the throttle when getting in and out of your chair? No. The 737 is tight, but you like the throttle quadrant is forward of the chair. So in order for you to kick that, you would have to really enter the chair in a very strange way. The things that you can move if you're not careful is the overhead panel, like you can hit that with your head when you're moving forward into the chair, and also you could potentially touch something on the rear of the center pedestal, but touching stuff when you're getting in and out of the chair is very rare, right? You can kind of hit the yoke a little bit with your knee, with your left, like if you're going into the left seat, when you're putting yourself in the seat, you can hit your left knee with the yoke and kind of momentarily cause a little bit of pilot-induced turbulence, but that's about it. Really, I would prefer. Here's where I would prefer the Airbus. I would prefer the bigger, larger cockpit of an Airbus, which kind of, because the Boeing is really cramped. Like it's like you need to be an acrobat to get in there. I don't know how the really old guys do it, to be perfectly honest. Scott Cole, thank you very much. I see you haven't added anything to Super Chat. If you did have a question and you couldn't get it in, then you just contact me on Facebook, send me a private message, and I'll answer your question there, okay? Right. Have you ever heard of a supersonic boom from Nick Eberts? No, I haven't heard. I have heard of them, of course, but I haven't actually heard a supersonic boom. The age of the Concorde, unfortunately, is over, and the military flights that do the transonic booms, they tend to do that out of the water to make sure that they're not scaring a livestock, for example, or crashing windows when they do. Would be cool though. I'd love to hear it in real life. Right, more questions from the Mentour Aviation app here. Mentor, have you ever been to an international aviation meeting in Le Bourget? No, I haven't. I am hoping that going forward, maybe I'll find a sponsor or so that would want me to come to one of these international shows. I'd love to go to the US, to go to Oshkosh, for example, or Le Bourget or Farnborough here in Europe or something like that. And if I do, I will let you guys know, obviously, that I will be there. But so far, I haven't been to any of those bigger ones. Mentor, did you ever do aerobatics? I haven't done aerobatics yet. It wasn't part of my initial training. It became later on. I think it was part of. Actually, I think it was actually part of my later training, but I got employed before my training was finished. So when we were about to start the kind of basic aerobatic course, I had already obtained the my employment. So I had to drop out of my flight training to start with my first airline job, which my classmates were very pissed about. But anyway, so I would have done it, but I haven't done it. I would love to try though, but I think I would probably just puke all over the cockpit. I am not built for those kind of things. Daniel Bengtsson, I will just take one more questions from the Mentor Aviation chat. By the way, it's full on. Oh, and by the way, guys, like I mentioned before, today, I'm just gonna have a look at it actually. I think that we are actually live streaming inside of the app. Yeah, it is. So I can actually go in on my on the app and see myself being live streamed, which is very, very strange. There you go. So I can actually go in on my on the app and see myself being live streamed, which is very, very strange. It is indeed very, very strange. Cool. So that's another thing that you can do inside of the app. It's a little bit of a delay, as you can see, but very cool. So, Daniel Bengtsson, back to your question. Hi, Mentor. I don't want to bring up negative things, but has anything changed after the German wing accident concerning the cockpit door? Not rule-wise, not yet. Okay, there has been some changes to. I think German authorities are probably looking at some real changes to the way that they exchange informations between doctors and airlines. Okay, that in the rest of Europe, you know, a flight doctor can come in and say when someone is not fit to fly, they can contact the airline and make sure that that person is not flying. But due to integrity rules in Germany, that wasn't possible, and that was one of the reasons why this could happen. Okay, and it's also one of the reasons why German license holders after this has actually been kind of accepted from the EASA rules to a certain extent. So that has brought some other problems with it because of these rules that they have in Germany. The cockpit door has always been different. Like in my airline, for example, we had a rule of always having two people in the cockpit way before this happened. All right, mainly to make sure that the remaining pilots inside of the cockpit did not become incapacitated. All right, that was the basic rule. So if one pilot left the cockpit, there would always be someone else stopping in to make sure that that pilot who was there didn't, you know, suddenly get a seizure or a heart attack or something would happen, because then there would be someone there who could quickly open the door and get the remaining pilot back in. So we had that for ages before. I think most airlines have probably adapted it since, and I know that there's been some pushback from the unions and stuff on this. It becomes very political. But so far, I haven't seen any plain written rules that have changed as a result of this horrible accident. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. This is one of the few accidents in the history that has absolutely nothing positive with it. All right, with some other airlines, if you look at accidents that happen all over the world, there's always something that the aviation world can learn from them. All right. So no matter how tragic they are, how much we work to avoid them, when they do happen, in most cases we can say, all right, so here, this is something we can change. This should change the checklist. We should implement some new training. We should do something that actually brings something positive that makes the whole airline world safer. The Germanwings accident did nothing of the sort. Right. The only thing that did was place distrust on pilots, drive the issues of physical or like psychological problems on the ground. So what we want as pilots, obviously, is that if you feel unwell, if you feel stressed, if you have some kind of problem with anxiety or depression, that you should be able to go to a flight doctor and go to your airline and say, listen, I need to stop flying for 6 months to sort this out. And that should be possible. All right, that should be available, and you should be treated just like any other illness, and then be able to come back. Now, these kind of things that happen in Germanwings, that would just drive things underground. So people would be afraid of saying something because they might lose their job or they might not be able to get an employment in the future. So even if people are feeling unwell because of this, there is a risk. I'm not saying that it's happening, but there is a risk that people will not go out with it, will not get cured, will be flying with it instead. And that would be very bad. All right, for security and safety, that would be very bad. That is the worst possible outcome. So when you see in the media is calling for, we should have harder screening for psychological problems. So people should be doing psychological testings throughout their career to make sure they're not getting sick. The only thing that happens when they issue stuff like that is that people become afraid of actually seeking help when they need to. So it is nothing positive that came out of that, unfortunately. I hope that answers your questions, Daniel, by the way. CA97, do you think pilot jobs are safe from automation? I've done a video on this. Check it out. I did it fairly recently. Will pilots be taken over by robots? I think I called it, something like that. It's inevitable at some point if we continue to work towards AI, artificial intelligence. Most jobs are going to be in the risk zone of disappearing. So it's going to take a long while. Like, watch the video, because I have been talking about this quite a lot in previous live streams as well. And the short answer is that for my generation of pilots, I'm not worried. For the next generation of pilots, probably not either. Maybe for my kids, if my kids would want to become pilots, or my grandkids want to become pilots, then there could be an issue, depending on how quickly this technology gets adapted. But no. Knowing the way that the airline business works, the regulations works, it takes 50 years to get something implemented, and then all of the fleets are going to have to be changed out. That also takes loads and loads of time, so I wouldn't be worried at all, no. Right, let's take some questions from the actual chat then. I know you guys have been waiting patiently. Can a short person have a chance to become a pilot for a major regional airline? Yes, they can. You have to check though. There are some limits to how short or tall you can be. I've heard some around 160 centimeters. If you're shorter than that, you might have to go and do a functional test as part of your medical to make sure that you can actually reach everything. It's still possible, so don't give up. But around 160 to up to and above 2 meters. I actually met a cadet training for our airline just last week, and he was 205 or 207 centimeters long, as in he was 2 heads taller than me. And I asked him, like, do you have any kind of problems sitting in the cockpit? Do you hit your head or stuff? And he's like, no, it works perfectly fine. So, you know, at the tall side, you can be very tall. This guy was an ex-pro basketball player that has financed his pilot training by playing basketball, which I thought was really, really cool. Yeah, so that's the answer to that. Jordan Coles, I heard Ryanair is now allowing its UK pilots to join a union. Are you in a union, and do you think this is a good thing? I tend to avoid talking about specific airlines, okay, and specific policies. I know that it's been a big thing in the news that Ryanair are now talking to unions. I think that it's a good thing. I think that it's always good that employees and employers can talk to each other on equal terms, okay? What kind of change will come with that is for the future to see. It's not as easy as saying that if you talk with the unions, things are going to get either worse or better. You have to see what happens, and the way that they communicate with each other is really important. So I'm not going to say either boo or bear in that yet. We are going to have to watch and see what happens to the pilots in the airline, and how the airline management is talking to their pilots and stuff. But I'm sure that we'll get to know that in a fair amount of time. So, do you recommend a modular or an integrated training? That depends on you, right? I can't say that, because it depends on how much money you have available. It depends on how much time you have available, and how you are as a person. Okay, you can get away with a lot cheaper training if you go a modular course that you yourself pick the school. There should be good schools, but you can get away much cheaper by building it together yourself, maybe using Bristol Ground School for your theoretical training, then picking some schools that have really good reputation. I would say that you can probably half the cost of the training by doing so. You can probably get it down to about 55,000 euros by doing it, picking it yourself. Now, that's going to take longer time. It's going to take more dedication for you. You are going to have to be making sure that you do the training and keeping up with everything yourself. There's not going to be anyone kind of chasing after you with a stick to make sure that everything is getting done on time. So there are some downsides to that. Also, the integrated courses might be twice as expensive, but sometimes they have good contact with actual airlines. So you can go through that school, get an interview through that school, and get in through a cadetship through that integrated course. And if that's the case, then that's of course good. Now, having said that, at the moment, the industry is really good. There's loads of jobs out there. So at the moment, that makes less of a difference, right? You're likely, if you're good and you've done a modular training, and maybe you're finishing up with one of these APC or APS courses that are coming up, you can get in anyway, right? You can get a job anyway. So if time is an issue, integrated is good. Money is an issue, modular is good. Job immediately and straight in, integrated probably in some cases. I'm not going to say all cases, but in some cases there are. But also, where do you want to live? So that this is really, really complicated stuff, and I can't really tell you what to do, or what I would probably do. If I wouldn't have gotten into the government sponsored program that I got into, I would have probably done it modular myself, because I'm not from a rich family. I cannot motivate spending that type of money on my training just to get the licenses, and it's a lot of money, guys. All right, if there's a difference of 50,000 euros between the different courses, that's 50,000 euros that you don't have to pay back to the bank, right? That you can spend on yourself. Makes maybe 5 or 6 years quicker to pay back the loans. So that's just my own kind of view on it, and I know that doesn't stand for everyone. Right? There are great integrated courses out there as well. Good, guys, as you can hear from my voice, it's starting to get out now, as it tends to do here after about 55 minutes. Milo's Flyer in the Mentour Aviation app. Dear Mentor, how useful is an ICAO license, and how can it be converted to an EASA? EASA is an ICAO license, alright? All licenses tends to be ICAO. I haven't even heard of a license that is not ICAO license, okay? So it's not like you get an ICAO license and you convert it into EASA. EASA is a license that is issued by one of the EASA member states, which are the European states. Now you can get a FAA ICAO license. In that case, you fly under the FAA rules, or under the Chinese rules, or under the United Arab Emirates rules, or stuff like that. So that question doesn't really make sense, right? It depends on what you want. If you want to convert it from, let's say, an FAA license to an EASA license, you're going to have to redo the theoretical part. the 14 exams, and you are probably going to have to do a skill test as well as maybe some training. So it'll cost you some money to do that. But if you, of course, if you can get a job in Europe, it's a great thing. More questions. Mentor, how can I become a YouTube moderator? Well, I have a couple of YouTube moderators already. I think Jack is doing a good job so far. I know that there's some other people that tend to help me as well. I have to basically choose the moderators, and at the moment I think people are kind of behaving well in the live chat. So at the moment there's no need for an extra one. If I do need one, just tell me again and I will pick you out. Mentor, I need your help. I'm studying for my ATPLs and I've just failed the POF, Principles of Flight, by 1 mark. It has really hit my confidence. Any ideas what to do? Yeah. You can't do anything about the missed test, okay? Everyone fails at some point. I have. You will. You have already, and you will in the future in some way or another. It doesn't matter anymore. Now, the only thing you can do is look forward, all right? There's no way, there's nothing good with kind of staying in the past. Just leave it behind you. Make sure that you study up even harder for the Principles of Flight next time and pass it. Get it out of the way. Don't think about it anymore. Look forward. This is something I tell to all of the guys who are doing their tests when I do the LPC, the license proficiency check with them, is that do not let one thing drag you down. Do not let it snowball. Okay? If you make one mistake, take a deep breath, think forward, and go forward. Now this is really important, guys. Really, really important. But because this is the same thing as if you're flying. You've made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes, all right? You can't keep making more mistakes because you're thinking about the previous mistake. You have to go forward. Then you can deal with it when you're in a position to do so. You can scream and you can shout and you can swear at yourself, but once you're done with that, you have to move forward, right? Do not let it pull you down because you can do it, you know that. So best of luck with the retests, and just nail the rest of them, and I'm sure you're gonna be fine. Right, guys, so let's see. Do you send the first officer out to see the disembarking passengers after you've had a hard landing? No, I don't. Nowadays, when we do these tight turnarounds that we do, we don't really have time. We don't go out and say bye to the passengers. The cabin crew does that. So, and I would never send someone out in my place. If I made a terrible landing, it would be me who would be apologizing, not the poor first officer. Okay, cool guys. So if you have anything more to ask now, send a super chat. Okay, I'm gonna look at the Mentour Aviation chat to see for the last couple of questions here, and then I'm gonna have to sign out for today because it's yeah, my voice is going, and I'm flying to the Canary Islands tomorrow. So I know, guys, that you've been wanting me to do more vlogs, and I haven't done that because I've been in the simulator. Okay, and first of all, I can't film in the simulator. I can't film my colleagues doing the test, and it's not appropriate to do so. So I'm not. But tomorrow I'll be flying. I'll be doing 1 flight without training, which is tomorrow, and then I'm doing 3 flights as line training. So I'm going to try to stitch together either a vlog from tomorrow. I'm going to fly to Las Palmas in the Canary Islands, and or maybe I will do one that covers the whole week. We'll see, depending on how much material I can get out. But there's more vlogs coming out now that I'm back flying again. Right, so the last super chat question. Hej, hur mycket har och kommer CRM att utvecklas? How much has CRM and how much will it move forward? Well, it's always being, it has made a huge difference from when it started back in the 80s-ish, 70s, 80s until now. It's been constantly evolving, and our understanding on how we people interact is constantly changing and constantly developing. So it's much better now, much better than it was in the beginning. We still have some way to go in order to understand why people make mistakes, why pilot error happens and what we can do about it. So you will probably see differences in how we approach it going forward, but I think that we are quite far down the road towards a very good training program when it comes to CRM. So pay attention to it. CRM training is going to be much more valuable to you than you think. Being a first officer is all about good CRM, and being a captain as well. Working in a two-pilot environment, sitting inside of an office that's the big, the size of a closet for 8 hours straight with a person that you might not really get along with, takes some serious CRM skills. To do pay attention on your CRM training. Right, guys. So, cool. What are your opinions on the new Lufthansa livery and the branding direction? I saw that this morning, actually. I saw the 747 coming in with the new branding. I didn't like it that much, actually. I thought it was a little bit boring, black and white. But I haven't seen it in entirety. Okay, I can't really say anything before I've seen it properly in daylight for myself. So that's basically it, guys. Once again, make sure that you download the app. I have the links to it here in the description of the video, as well as the links to the pilotprep.co.uk app that I've made together with them to prepare you for interviews and for getting into flight schools, and what kind of maths you need and stuff like that. Check out brilliant.org, which is the sponsor of the channel. You're going to see me doing more videos together with them coming up. They do a good job with improving maths and physics skills, so check them out. Have an absolutely fantastic day wherever you are. Stay tuned for more content. There will be more content coming up on Thursday, as always. Take care of each other, guys, and bye-bye.